It's 3:30 on October 15th of 2025, and I'd like to open the meeting of the ABC. First item on the agenda is to have election of officers for the upcoming year. Any nominations for chair?
I'll nominate Peter.
Second.
Before we vote, any other
Vice Chair.
nominations?
Any other nominations? Guess that's that. Vice chair would be next on the list.
No, want to do it again? Sure.
Aye.
So we have a slate, a motion to elect that slate by
I'll make that motion.
Scott, seconded by
Mona.
Mona.
Rita too.
Shepherd, aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Unanimous. Great.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Susan.
Hey, Susan.
Hello.
Welcome, welcome. Let me know if you're ready, Peter.
I'm ready.
Okay, so few topics on the agenda today. First, we'll briefly go over the budget binder, highlight some of the changes. Second, we will review the initial budget proposal presentation. We had originally slated an opportunity to talk about total compensation at today's meeting. That was in hopes that the data would be available, reviewed by the select board, and then we could kind of review where the select board was headed with it. We're not quite there yet. We still have plenty of time, but I expect we'll probably do that sometime in November. So that isn't on the agenda. And then the last thing that we'll do is we'll review the budgets that will be in attendance for the upcoming meeting next week to identify any questions we have ahead of time, get those to department heads and prepare that. Anything else folks want to address or discuss in today's meeting? And we'll do like we did last year and include in the set of minutes what the agenda will look like for the next meeting. So we'll get into that cycle so we kind of have an order of events if that works. So budget binders for very similar in years past. The entire budget binder is available electronically, barrington.nh.gov/2026 budget. The table of contents, which is just inside the cover sheet, that detailed table of contents is all links on the budget binder webpage. And so any individual document, you can just go in. Honestly, I use the online resource a lot more than I use the physical budget binder because it's all electronic. You can search, you can open the links and have access to that data that way. I also, as I have done in the past, sent out to the budget committee members a copy of the Excel file of the budget proposal, which includes the text of the comments from department heads, not only from this year, but from years past, and expenditure and budget data going back, I think, to 2013, so that you have that history and you can kind of do your own analysis for those folks that like making pivot tables and things like that. So a few additions to the budget binder. First, and probably the most substantial addition or change is something that we trialed last year, which was a standardized format for the budget narratives. So we heard from the budget committee, the select board, and even from the public that every department does their narrative a little bit different. It's kind of hard to track and find the specific details to a budget line when you're looking for them. So what we did is we tried out a format last year, which the budget committee liked. And so we implemented that this year. So now in chapter 1, there is a full, every line item budget narrative, so that pages 1 to 57, so that every single line item in the budget you can see the 2025 budget, 2026 budget, the change, and then the narrative explanation for that budget. Each section for departments is also separately included in the chapter for each budget, so that the information's all there. But I think for some folks, in terms of a reference, they want to be able to look up an account line and see the details, and this will be a great way to do that. And so because this is something new, certainly if you have feedback or things you want to see change in the future, we can do that. One of the other big benefits of this is we can keep these documents updated throughout the process because Amy and I set this up as a mail merge. So department heads submit the data in the Excel file format, kind of like what you see. And then we created this Word document as a mail merge so that we just automatically pull in the data. So it can be updated with a few clicks when budget lines change or explanations change so that we can keep the narratives in sync with the budget proposal, which, as you know, sometimes the gap gets bigger and bigger throughout the process. So that's a big change. It took a lot to implement, but now that we have it, it'll be pretty easy to improve upon and keep updated. So that's one of the big ones. Something else that we did, you'll notice that there's a new chapter, chapter 8, which we haven't had before, and this is revolving fund data. So we only talked about this a little bit. I think it was more of a priority for Amy and I to give the budget committee, select board, and community some exposure to the operating budget adjacent funding sources that keep our operations going. And so one of the bigger ones from an operational basis is the recreation department, because the vast majority of their operations are funded from the recreation revolving fund. Also, the fire department in recent years has used their revolving fund to fund more and more of their operations. So it really becomes important to understand the full scope of operations and costs in these departments to be able to review that. We also have a transfer station revolving fund, which we don't spend from right now. Again, that's kind of a savings account to prepare for anticipated cost increases. But anyways, what you'll see is there's a sheet that gives revenue history, 2026 projections, and expenses with the same, and then the fund balance, a history of the fund balance. So these were created, again, to give some exposure to this information. Oh, we also have the police outside detail revolving fund. So I don't think we'll spend a lot of time on that data in terms of making decisions or recommendations about it, but I think it's important to have exposure to those dollars. So we will likely refer to that throughout the process.
Can I ask a quick question?
Please.
As the first page after tab 1, has that been updated since it was published on 9/30? It's the budget summary by
Yes.
function?
Yeah, that $15,000 I'll talk about in the presentation.
Okay, because
That's the only
I see another huge, I have a question about a number in here.
Okay, which number?
So it is the transfer station administration. It looks like, from what I'm seeing, the year-end estimate is 108,000 with 93,000 remaining. And we're budgeting 213,000 moving forward.
Do you want to check that in the budget master? I suspect probably one of the categories was either carried over as text, so it didn't total the sum in the formula, but that's an excellent.
That's a big chunk of change, if that we can. Thank you for checking that.
Absolutely. Yep. Appreciate that. Okay. Other things in the budget binder, there was a little bit of a shuffling. We talked at the organizing meeting in July about having the order of the budget binder and the order of our review sync up with the chart of accounts. So we're just going beginning to end, and we're not bouncing around to different sections. And so I think that will be easier. So the budget binder chapters are presented that way also. There's still kind of the miscellaneous details are still all bundled into the now it's chapter 12. So there's some miscellaneous details in there, but we'll still plan to go through the budget by following the chart of accounts. Also, things like cemeteries was always presented by the fire chief, because the fire chief was also the chair of the cemetery trustees. That's been pulled out, so some of those changes have happened. I believe that's the bulk of the changes to the budget binder. Amy? Anything else that we changed of note?
Well, we did the estimated budget.
So yeah, we included some data at the beginning of the process, which we haven't provided before, mostly because a lot of things change, which change those numbers. But we felt like after last year's process, it might be helpful for the budget committee, select board, and community to have some data as a starting point for the beginning of the process. And then obviously we'll revisit and update those. The two big things were the default budget, which is found in chapter 1, the default budget summary by function. It's right after the proposed narrative. So this gives a, just like the first page after the chapter 1, this gives the budget summary by function for the default budget and how it compares to the proposed budget. And then the other items, two items, which are in chapter 11, which is the tax rate, are the first and second pages, which give an estimated tax rate impact for the current proposal for 2026. Now, you know, the reason we don't usually do this now is because we don't even have our 2025 tax rate yet.
And where's that, I'm sorry?
Chapter 11.
Thank you.
First and second pages of chapter 11. And then the second page is the estimated tax rate impact by warrant article. But I think what Amy and I felt was that it would be helpful to understand that of what's being proposed right now, if the budget as proposed and all the warrant articles as proposed, if they all passed, we'd be looking at a $3.89 a thousand tax rate, which is 41 cents higher than what we project the 2025 tax rate to be. And then the next page, which is the estimated tax rate impact by warrant article, shows what that breakdown is by warrant article, both in tax rate amount and dollar amount for an average home. So I hope that information will be helpful to guide the discussion so we understand at the beginning where we're starting, knowing that as we get our 2025 tax rate and as budget proposals change, those numbers will change as well. Thanks, Amy. Did you find anything of interest in the budget master for estimated remaining?
No, but I put a note in. I just
Okay.
can't listen and
Yep.
do that at the same time.
Okay, so we'll look into that. Anything else with the budget binder, big picture? Anything that's not in there that you'd hope to see or want to see?
I was reviewing what we're doing next week, and it looks like a tremendous amount.
Okay.
Not sure we're going to live within a 2-hour window, but we'll see.
I think for our purpose, we could spend some time on executive and administration tonight, this afternoon,
Since we're not doing
since we're not doing total compensation right now. And then that would just leave clerk, tax, and land use next week, which are usually pretty fast. So, okay, great. Any other thoughts or questions before I give the initial presentation?
Should it be green or red?
Green.
Okay. The select board strategic plan.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the plan, but what I'm looking at this, something that is missing for me is the economic development goal, the plan. Because I don't really see anything in there.
In preservation of rural character, there's some economic development items. So let me. Strategic plans in chapter 1, just after the presentation. For those of you that want to follow along. So goal number 5, Farida, in preservation of rural character is strategic commercial growth. Encourage strategically located, low-impact commercial and industrial development to broaden the property tax base and mitigate the fiscal pressure and growth on municipal services. That's a component of economic development, but certainly if you had recommendations to expand on that.
Yes, it's very broad. This is very broad and just like a sentence, right?
So
I'm talking about, like what, I mean, the goal is to reach to something, but what are the itemized, that, I mean, what are we doing to make our town a little bit economically better?
Excellent question. So the full report that includes the action items is the next document. It's an 11-page document, and goal 5 has 4 separate action items on page 5. So the first one is utilize the 125 acres of town-owned land on 125 South near Lee to attract suitable commercial and industrial development. There's sub-items on this one. We actually have a agreement with somebody to sell a portion of that lot. They're working on development plans right now that could go before the planning board. So a sub-item under that would be finalizing the sale of a portion to an abutting property owner and explore access to the northerly portion. Another action item there is attract and promote commercial industrial development in areas zoned accordingly. Encourage private investment in childcare, senior housing options, and elderly support services, including adult daycare. Work collaboratively to align conservation efforts, economic development, and community engagement around shared rural values. So those are some of the action items, but like I said, by all means, if this group or you individually have suggestions, make those available to the select board.
Okay, great.
Anything else?
Yeah, because we're so limited. Our budget is very limited.
It is, no question. Okay, great. So I'll spend a couple of minutes going over the initial budget presentation, which follows a similar format. You have a printed copy of this presentation in your budget binder. It's also will be up on the screens. I think I can do focus on content to make that a little bit bigger. Again, I'll point out 2026 budget. That URL is all these documents exist. And as we go through the presentation, the specific topics have a separate link down below, which take you right to that chapter in the budget binder. So one slide summary. First, a couple of notes on the strategic plan, which is an excellent segue. Some notes on the financial stability of Barrington, which is especially important as where we are in 2025 in New Hampshire in general. The 2026 budget proposal, which is $10,438,000 and some additional dollars, which I'll update this presentation on, which is a $548,000 increase or 5.54% over 2025. The increases are a result of paving, the second half of a new patrol officer, which was added in 2025. We funded that from July to December, so we have to fund the additional half of that, which is about $60,000. Inflation and staffing. Revenue remains stable, and we have a proposal for $988,000 in separate warrant articles. So I think it's important as every time we discuss the budget process and we approach this, what are we really trying to accomplish? Just as much as a strategic plan, the select board's mission is what guides myself, the department heads and staff as we're preparing a budget. What are we doing? What are we doing as a local government entity? So Barrington Select Board will provide proactive leadership, engaging in effective communication with the public and municipal employees while overseeing a government that promotes a resilient and sustainable community, public safety, wise preservation and development of the social and natural environment, maintenance and development of infrastructure, and support for community services that assure quality of life. And the values that they've identified, the select board, as in terms of the political leaders steering this ship, are careful financial stewardship of resources, transparent government with open communication and broad participation, honesty and high ethical standards, civil, fair, and responsive service, wise collaborative decisions based upon objective facts, and a focus on both the present and the future. This year, the select board took their goal-setting process and evolved into a 5-year strategic plan, which focused their efforts and the work that they have put into goal setting in prior years, updating the mission, vision, and values, and brought that really to the next level. So they reaffirmed their vision, which is we, the elected governing board of Barrington, New Hampshire, seek to shape a future that values our past, preserves our natural and human resources while working together with the public toward a bright economic and community-oriented lifestyle through a provision of effective governmental services that characterizes a healthy, dynamic community. And there's 4 key focus areas of the select board strategic plan. Organizational excellence, which is summarized as maximizing the effectiveness of town resources by investing in skilled staff, improving internal processes, embracing innovation, and delivering responsive, high-quality service to residents. Preservation of character, which we just talked about, is protecting Barrington's unique identity by following the master plan's vision, supporting a vibrant town center, conserving natural resources, guiding development thoughtfully, and honoring community values. Planned investment which is summarized as ensuring the town's infrastructure keeps pace with growth through strategic long-term planning and responsible investments in essential public assets like roads, bridges, and public safety facilities. Community engagement is the fourth key focus area, which is fostering trust and collaboration by promoting transparency, increasing public awareness, and encouraging meaningful resident participation in local governance and planning. As we talked about, there are identified goals within each key focus area. And those goals in the full strategic plan document have action items to achieve those goals. And again, this is a 5-year strategic plan where the select board hopes to accomplish and implement this strategic plan over those 5 years. We've been able to make a tremendous amount of progress just in the months since this was adopted. This was adopted in April. But this is something that the select board will revisit every year after they reorganize following the March election. So I won't read through each goal, but organizational excellence has 3 identified goals. There's 4 goals in preservation of rural character. There's 2 goals in planned investment and 3 goals in community engagement. For those of you that follow along with the select board meetings, what we've done is we've taken these icons for organizational excellence, preservation, character, planned investment, and community engagement, and we include those icons and the goal number in the town administrator report next to each topic which is substantive to those goals, those specific goals. So that if you're looking at a town administrator report and you're wondering why is the select board spending any time on a potential septic ordinance on the shoreline protection zone in Barrington, well, you can look and see, well, this is part of the select board strategic plan for preservation of rural character. Well, which goal is that? What does that mean? This is land conservation and stewardship. So how can we take care of the natural resources that we have? So we're trying to draw a line between all the work that the staff, department heads, select board do to the strategic plan and communicate that to residents. So I'd like us all through this process to consider these items and ask ourselves as we're reviewing budget proposals, what does this actually do? What does this mean for the strategic plan and the direction that the select board's trying to take the town? Is how are our budget proposals meeting or missing those objectives? Questions about the strategic plan, mission, vision, or values? Okay, thank you. The population and demographics, so consumer price index the last 12 months is just under 3%. Barrington's population is estimated at 9,629, which is up 303 from the 2020 census, and up 75 from 2023. That still leaves us at over 15 years, an average population growth of about 75 residents per year, which has been pretty consistent. The median household income is just under $100,000 and the poverty rate is just under 7%. Homeownership rate is high in Barrington at 90.4%.
If the data coming from the census in 2020 up 303, what's the data from 2023? How are we, because we're not doing another census in 2023.
The state of New Hampshire has population estimates.
Okay.
From a variety of sources. So they use the Bureau of Labor Statistics does their ACS surveys in between the census, which provides some projections, but the state takes and estimates those populations every year.
So that's from the state.
That's from the state.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, of course. Okay, moving on, funding local government services. So financial stability is one of our core priorities. We want to make sure that we have uninterrupted service to residents. We don't have spikes in our property tax expectations of residents, property tax payments, and the provision of municipal government. And so our revenue is an important part of that. We have a few buckets of revenue which fund local government. Surprisingly, in Barrington, property taxes represent less than 50% of what we use to fund government in Barrington. It's 48% for our purpose. 27% comes from vehicle registration fees. 12% comes from state aid. 7% comes from fees for service, things like the transfer station, building permit fees, et cetera, and then miscellaneous revenues, an additional 6%. I'll point out, since we talked about the revolving funds separately, this funding of local government services doesn't contemplate the revolving funds at all. That's all adjacent to our revenues and expenditures. This is just the calculation of our revenue and our approved budget. So those additional items are from the revolving fund, even diminish the portion of property taxes more, because those are from fees, locally collected fees.
Do you expect any change in state or federal aid going forward?
No, not currently. So the two big areas for Barrington are meals and rooms tax. That's the single largest. That's about $1 million that we collect every year. And our highway block grant funding from the state is about $250,000, say. And the meals and rooms tax distribution is, those of you who've been a part of the group for a few years, you'll remember that there's a state law that was passed many years ago that require a mathematical distribution of meals and rooms tax revenue to communities, period. Whatever the state collects, I think say it's 30%. Don't quote me on that, but that's the number. It has to be distributed to towns and cities. And there's a formula for doing that has been deemed fair. The legislature, during their biennial budget review, had consistently suspended that law and just picked a number, budgeted a number. We're going to distribute this much money to towns and cities. And there had always been a surplus of what the statute would require, and they use that for other purposes. Governor Sununu, at his leadership when he was governor, changed that. And for 2 budget cycles, they returned the statutory distribution to towns and cities. And our revenue went up almost 50% over that 4-year cycle, essentially. So this legislative cycle, that was back on the chopping block. And there were a lot of proposals, and fortunately, they all failed. And so we're still in this area where that is, we have the statutory distribution. Meals and room tax revenue is still going up. It's higher than projections by single-digit %, but it's higher than projections. So that we're good for that for right now. It's unlikely that the state will change that during the 2-year budget cycle. The budget's been adopted. We have that. That doesn't mean that they couldn't try. I think it's possible that they revisit that during the next budget cycle. And it's also possible that with an economic downturn, the actual revenue collections for meals and rooms tax could go down in the future, and that could affect our revenue. But no immediate pressing threats to that revenue source. Highway block grant, similarly, that funding hasn't been targeted in the same way that others have. That doesn't mean that it won't be. It's a much smaller portion at $250,000. We would feel it, but there's there isn't any credible information that is being threatened right now. Good question, sir.
So so it's arbitrary, basically, how much state and federal aid Barrington gets?
No, they're both formulas. Like I said, now with meals and rooms tax, they're following the formula. The highway block grant is also a formula based on how many miles of roads we maintain, what our population is, what our land area is, things like that. So they follow those formulas, they apply those formulas. The legislature, since I've been in this business, hasn't touched the formulas for highway block grant. They have played with the formulas for meals and rooms tax. And that just takes a lot of advocacy from the municipal association and others to keep the money that towns and cities expect, they keep that coming to them. Okay, that's funding local, please.
Do we have a fairly consistent percentage of property tax to the overall budget? Right now it shows 48%, but is that fairly consistent?
In Barrington, it's consistent. Yep, it's actually been when I first started putting together this pie chart, it was 52%. It's 48 now. In 2025, I think it'll end up being probably close to 50%. And some of the decisions that we made, like putting 100% of ambulance revenue into the revolving fund, contribute to that, and setting a ceiling on the transfer station transfer station revenue at $225,000, that contributes to that. But this isn't consistent across the state. Just like we have a very small municipal tax rate compared to municipalities across the state, This pie chart is unique to Barrington. Not a lot of other towns and cities operate in this way. A much larger portion comes from property taxes. We're just lean. Municipal property tax rate history. So I include in here the years we've done assessments, because to compare apples to apples, you have to correct the tax rate. You know, when you see the tax rate go down, that doesn't mean you're paying less in taxes typically. It just means that the rate is corrected for the change in value townwide. We didn't have a change in values in 2025. We will have a change in values in 2026. Right now, the data that we report to the state shows that we're about 20%. Our assessments are about 20% lower than what the market is determining values for properties as they're selling. And so we go through a revaluation process to reset the clock and keep that current. It's important that we do that consistently and not end up too far off. The state dictates plus or minus 10% for your equalized ratio is what it's called. Some communities push that, like in Rochester, they were in the news last year. They had their mobile homes values increases over 200% on average, with some increasing 300%. And the problem is that doesn't, you know, if your property tax assessed value increases 100% and the rate decreases by 50% and no other changes happen, you're not paying any different taxes. But what happens is there's inequities. The market doesn't change values of properties at the same rate. Like in Barrington, this is what they experienced in Rochester, the lower income housing, the market drove the prices of those properties up a lot faster at a higher rate than all the rest of the properties. So they had 5 years worth of that change that they fixed in 1 year. And so the property tax burden shifted a lot in Rochester from how it was assessed 5 years ago, or how the market was deemed to be 5 years ago, to how it is now, instead of gradually over time. And so it's important that we do that. That'll happen in 2026, but this is property tax rate history for now.
Later in 2026?
It doesn't matter when it happens in 2026, because assessed value is a snapshot in time, whatever the value of the property is on April 1st, period. So the April 1st, 2026 value will reflect the revaluation. We don't report that to the state until September, and they use that to set the tax rate typically in November, sometimes in October. Okay. Here's a graph of that rate history. I can't talk about our municipal tax rate without talking about this dynamic of Barrington being very large by population and valuation and land area, but having a very small municipal tax rate. 7th percentile for the portion of the rate that goes to the town overall. 6th percentile when you put the municipal tax rate per capita. 10th percentile corrected for valuation, and 8th percentile corrected for land area. So we continue to be a very lean municipal government. Again, on the measures of financial stability, we want a stable municipal tax rate, which we just talked about. We have limited budgetary tax impact for 10 years. So if you look at this bar chart, what this shows is that from 2013 to 2023, the taxes paid, the actual taxes paid, not the rate, not the assessed values, the actual taxes paid on an average homeowner in Barrington went down $30 over 10 years. Inflation of that time period was 30%. And so the rate, the total amount that folks have paid in taxes over those 10 years has increased from $5,600 to almost $7,100. But the municipal tax rate, the taxes paid to the municipality over a 10-year period went down $30 for the average homeowner. And so that's important to keep in mind as we look at what we're doing and maintain our consistency in our approach to providing quality services in a lean and financially respectful way. Unassigned fund balance, another important one. We have a policy to maintain the midpoint of the range. We're right at the midpoint of the range now. One of the things we've done recently, the amount we contribute to unassigned fund balance, and as a result, the amount that we use has been continuing to decline. And that's a result of more specific budgeting and much more specific revenue estimations. We want to get it right. We don't want to artificially inflate our budget proposals, and we don't want to underestimate our revenue. And so we've been closing that gap very successfully, but as a result, we're not contributing as much to unassigned fund balance every year. We don't have as much to lose. It's not a terrible problem because it shows, strong financial management of the town's financial resources, but we're not able to fund warrant articles by fund balance as much or at all. This chart kind of shows that as well, and that we've maintained that midpoint of the range. So the proposed operating budget, the approved operating budget in 2025 is $9,890,708. The proposal is $10,438,912, 5.5%. Difference is $548,000. Of that 500,
We have different numbers then.
yes, that's the 15,000.
Okay.
Yep, I'll get to that. This eagle eyes, can't get anything past you. Good news though, we're going the right direction. So of that 550,000, 76% of that is wage and benefit impact factors, and 24% is additional budget impacts. So the wage and benefit budget impact factors, we talked briefly, the police officer that was hired in July of 2025, we budgeted for half of the year. We have to budget for the second half of the year. That's new money in the budget. That's about $60,000. The library made some staffing changes mid-year in 2025. They put the digital services library assistant from part-time to full-time benefits eligible. They reassigned the interlibrary loan library duties and replaced with a library assistant, which is a lower paid position, but that reduction didn't offset the benefit costs of going from part-time to full-time. They also reduced the additional library assistant hours from the hours that were specific. So the net result of that in the budget proposal is about $17,500. So census updates, so other staffing changes is $275,000. Census updates, this is when we have an employee, say, that takes in lieu of health insurance payment, and they're replaced with somebody that comes in with a family plan. That's a swing for the town of tens of thousands of dollars. And so sometimes we have an employee who is at the lower end of the wage matrix based on their experience, and we're able to attract or hire somebody with some experience or certifications that increase their wage rate. So these census changes as a result throughout the year of these changes impact the budget. In 2026, that's about $107,000. Cost of living adjustment, which is at 3% based on the available data currently, represents $116,000 in the budget. Pay plan step increase allowance, this would be the merit, represents about $54,000. It's important to point out two things. One, the total compensation study will likely adjust how the select board approaches any wage increases. And so it was important to us that we put these numbers into the budget at the beginning, just as this is what a status quo continuing as we would normally. This is the money that would be included in the budget. And so where that is allocated and how it's allocated will be subject to much discussion, I imagine. Also important to point out that the wage increases for the police department are not in the budget because their collective bargaining agreement is up, and that'll be a separate warrant article. So this doesn't reflect wage increases for the police collective bargaining unit. Once we get to the warrant articles, I have included a placeholder which shows some money in a warrant article so that we are at least keeping in mind that there's other money that will be proposed to voters. So we're not just putting our blinders onto that. Benefit cost increase, finally, to the good news. The proposal is, the budget proposal includes $38,000 in additional costs for benefits. So I will try to briefly explain the crazy health dynamic exists right now. The reason we saved $15,000 from what was originally projected is because we estimated an increase in benefit costs of 10%, and our actual increase was 7.4%. And so the reason our actual cost increase was only 7.4% is because Health Trust, our insurer, changed the definition of large groups. So a large group was previously 50 or more eligible employees, and now it's 50 or more enrolled employees. All of our employees are eligible for health insurance. We don't subsidize every employee's health insurance, but they can all sign on to the health insurance and pay for themselves. We only have 38 enrolled employees. And so the fact that we moved from what was a small, large group into the small group pool means that our experience just got a lot cheaper because our claims experience is shared among many more enrollees than we were just as us. And so that's reflected in our premiums. As a comparison, and this is where health insurance landscape right now gets really crazy, the small group rate changes, premium rate changes from this current coverage period to the coverage period starting July 2026, 20% increase in premiums, okay? It gets crazier. We have Health Trust. The only other health risk pool right now is school care. New Hampshire Interlocal Trust went insolvent last year. Just shut down. See you later. School care just issued $30 million of assessments to cover claims for the coverage period ending June 2025.
$2 million just to Londonderry.
$421,000 just to Barrington. And these were unanticipated bills that represent almost 2 months of premiums that they had to send to their members because they didn't collect enough in premiums to cover their claims, and they don't have enough reserves to cover it. So they don't have their rates for the next coverage period yet. That's going to be set in early November. But if they had to make up $30 million from the last year, that $421,000, you know they're going to charge that in premiums, and you got to figure they're going to charge more than that because they've got to build reserves. And so the school, and I don't envy the school, this isn't the school's fault, you know, the town has looked at proposals from school care before, but it is, and that's, all of that isn't even to point out the legislation in the last legislative cycle, which will come up again next year, trying to essentially dissolve the risk pools, trying to change the dynamic enough so that risk pools could or should cease to exist. So headline is Barrington is in a pretty good spot comparatively for the next year. That said, we are actively keeping a finger on the pulse of all available options and making sure that we're ready if the landscape gets shaken up dramatically. But for the time being, we have a moderate rate increase because of a fortuitous rule change from Health Trust, and that was able to reduce the operating budget proposal $15,000 from what the initial proposal was as a result of that. I'll stop there. Questions about that?
Is there any explanation as to why they missed the mark so badly?
Okay, so
30 million.
5 million, 30 million.
new drugs is a big one. So things like Ozempic and Wegovy and these new drugs that are hitting the market have become really popular. And so they've seen much higher utilization than they anticipated and they didn't know about because the drugs are new, that type of thing. And one of the dynamics of this health landscape, which is, it blows my mind, I can't understand it, is the state, through the Secretary of State's office who regulates the risk pools, has put a tremendous amount of pressure on the risk pools to reduce the amount of reserves they hold. And to the point where during COVID, when where their claims were lower than anticipated, both school care and Health Trust gave back tens of millions of dollars each year as a return of surplus to members. And the Health Trust, I don't know about school care, Health Trust didn't want to give the money back. They said, this is great. We have a healthy reserve. This is what our actuaries recommend, but it was pressure from the Secretary of State's office. The legislation from last year, sponsored by the Secretary of State's office, set reserve levels, very low reserve levels, saying that this is all you could have for reserves. And if you need more money, do assessments like school care just did. And so school care sat alongside the Secretary of State's office and supported the legislation, saying we're in great financial position. We are solvent, we have strong financials, and the Secretary of State's office agreed with them. We've looked, they're great, no problem. Health Trust, on the other hand, who is objecting to the legislation, Secretary of State's office, they're at risk of being insolvent. Their finances are so terrible, they are likely to be insolvent. The only risk pool that the Secretary of State's office pointed out and said their financials are so terrible, and we've had people go in, and they're the only ones that haven't issued an assessment or gone insolvent. New Hampshire Interlocal Trust went insolvent. Oh, by the way, the Secretary of State's office is currently taking enforcement action against Health Trust, saying that their reserves are too high. And so I don't understand it. I think
Secretary of State doesn't have good accountants.
they've hired
Politicians instead of accountants.
they hired a firm out of like North Carolina to fight this fight, attended all of the hearings, all of the legislative hearings, lambasted Health Trust. There is a series of a dozen back and forth, highly technical papers issued by this consultant of the Secretary of State's office, rebuttals by Health Trust, rebuttals back and forth. And all the things Health Trust said to be true have turned out to be pretty true. And it's crazy. It's honestly crazy. We are, knock on wood, we are currently insulated from it a little bit. We may not be forever, but it doesn't need to be a central discussion of our 2026 budget development, which I feel fortunate about. The school will be a different story. Like I said, the $421,000 that they have to pay, unanticipated bill. They may have a $30 million budget, but that's a lot of money. Okay.
Is the cost of living already set by the board?
No.
Because last year they jumped the gun and we didn't have any discussion about that. They've
Well,
already done it.
yeah, so the reason it isn't set by the board is because of the total compensation study. So it may not be, this process may not be a traditional cost of living adjustment. It may be looking at wages in general and putting them in, assigning classifications to positions appropriately on an updated wage matrix.
Yeah.
So it'll be a different process, I expect, this year.
What's our, say, average or useful number as percent we pay on employees' health insurance as a percentage?
As a percentage of the total cost or a percentage of total compensation?
Percentage of total cost.
So we have two plan offerings. The first plan offering is a deductible plan, a site of service plan it's called, and the town pays 100% of those premiums. The employee is responsible for all of the deductibles, copays, et cetera. The second plan is a no deductible plan. It has a copay, and the town pays 85% of the premiums for that plan. So the town's 85% share of that plan is more expensive than 100% of the site of service deductible eligible plan.
Because one thing to keep in mind, and I don't think we've ever had this discussion, is that when a COLA is announced, in this case, close to 3%, it includes healthcare. And we dissociate that from any kind of COLA that we're talking about. So an employee is going to get a benefit of increased service, if you will, from the town for healthcare, plus a 3% COLA. So that kind of doubles up. I think I read that health insurance is 12 or 14% of the COLA. So it's fairly significant part of it.
Yeah, so I guess that only applies to the subset of our employees that are on the plan that the town pays 100% of the premiums on.
But even the one that pays 85, they're still getting
disproportionate.
Say it goes up $2,000 in 1 year, they're getting the benefit of that in part of their benefit.
Interesting. Yep. So I wonder if 12% of a cost of living is medical costs, I wonder how much of that 12% is insurance and how much is other medical costs.
I can't answer that
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Don't know.
But something to pay attention to. Like I said, I think it'll matter less this year because the total compensation study, I think, will drive wage changes, proposed wage changes.
Yeah.
But something to pay attention to.
Thanks.
And I really appreciate you doing that. I know we talked about it last year at this time, and it's very helpful.
Great.
So thank you.
Of course.
So are you guys do they have PPO and HMO or what do they offer, account for?
Yeah, so the risk pools are, so Health Trust as risk pool partners with Anthem and has a suite of plan offerings. We're allowed to offer 3 to employees. We're able to pick 3. Right now we have 2. And the plans are substantially similar, but they are, and I'm not, my health jargon isn't as specific. HMO and PPO, which one is, you have to kind of be like in network in the state? HMO. So those are the plans. It is, I don't think, there are no coverage restrictions for Anthem for the plans offered through Health Trust. They do some medical consumerism benefits where they have site of service locations that cost less to Anthem. And so they will give you a benefit if you use one of those locations.
Sure. I mean, they
But
all
you
have
could go
in-network
anywhere.
services, yes.
Yep, but you could go anywhere. Yep, good question. Okay. We talked to the last item here is just the fire EMS transition staffing, which was approved in April of 2025. So this is just the additional, essentially 25% of that. Additional budget impact factors of, and again, now we're talking about just the 25% of the budget increase. What is that comprised of? $50,000 additional in paving. We talk about this every year. Inflation, the amount we can do with the same amount of money is less every year. We try to keep increasing this amount. Revaluation, we talked about how we need a revaluation in 2026. That costs money. Library building maintenance. This is utilities and electrical costs of the new library for a full year. And it's important to point out that $12,871 of this was shifted from library contracts, which was a reduction. They consolidated where this is budgeted in the budget proposal. So we'll see that in the reductions.
Have we made any estimates, but how has it turned out with our solar panels down there and our energy usage in that building?
We'll have more data available for that by the time the library budget proposes. With the trustee president here, we'll reflect in the notes to make sure that they present on that when they come or discuss that. Election part-time wages. So this is a tough one every year when we do a budget because we go from having 4 elections in a year to 1 election to 3 elections to 1 election to 4 elections. And so the budget goes like this. And the unfortunate part is in those years where we go from having 1 election to having 4 elections, we don't have that money in the default budget because it's last year's budget. So I wish there was a better way to do this. I mean, set up a capital reserve and just add the same amount to it every year. That seems like a silly exercise for something like, election costs. But anyways, we have a $13,000 increase because there's 3 elections in 2026. General government buildings contracts. So we have a working facility manager now. We have facility maintenance plans. And so we're being a lot more diligent taking care of our facilities. We're identifying tasks which have been deferred or just not done in the past. And now that the community has invested in these buildings, the town hall, the library, we've got the community center underway. We're really focusing on taking better care of them. And so there's some additional costs.
Are there specific contracts you can tell us?
They're all listed in the narrative.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Pest management, HVAC servicing, generator servicing, things like that. But they're all itemized with the cost of those contracts in the narrative. Please.
Okay, so the election, nevertheless, it's a cost associated with it, right?
Yes.
So we should put it in capital reserve, whatever. It's like, because we know which year has like 1 or 3, because it's still a significant amount of money.
So yes, we could, the only way, I always prefer to budget a consistent amount of money or, growing slightly so that we don't have these peaks and valleys year over year.
Yeah, sure, we have an assigned budget, so it will go to that.
So we could have established a capital reserve and say contribute $10,000 every year. So in years when we have 1 election, we only spend 5,000. Years when we have 3 elections, we spend 15. For the portion of the budget that it is, probably a not necessary exercise, but we do still have to deal with the fact that in the operating budget, things are going to go like this. So we could dig into that more when we get to elections. General government buildings, electric. So Eversource cost increases for delivery went up substantially. So this isn't the generation, this is the cost for delivery. Barrington entered a 28-month supply contract at 10 cents per kilowatt hour. in September 2025. This gives us budgeting stability, which is important for us. Electricity costs aren't a huge part of our budget, but if we can count on that and it can be stable, that's valuable to us.
Will we have stats for the solar panels here on this building in terms of electric usage?
We'll make sure to get that from Jim when we talk about facilities. Thank you. Budget decreases. Highway building maintenance, this was a budget item for specific projects in 2025. We completed those projects and we have fewer needs in 2026. Library contracts, again, this was a movement of that amount of money from the contracts to the building maintenance. So we see that offsetting. General government buildings equipment, we bought a new mower, and so we don't have that cost proposal in 2026. Library bond interest, this will go down every year. The principal amount will stay level, and the amount of interest we pay will decline. Revenue impacts. So something else that we did, I'm realizing that I didn't mention earlier, is you have our 2026 revenue estimate in your budget binder already. Usually we wait till farther in the year to kind of better understand 2025 current year revenue, but we did a 2026 estimate. And so from that exercise, really no change from 2025 in total. There are specific changes. We're looking at an increase of motor vehicle registrations by about $100,000. This is consistent with the trend for the last couple of years in increased fees. I will point out that the state raised their portion of the fees for motor vehicle. We can't touch our fees. The state sets our fees that we collect, but the money the state collects, they increased them a lot. Like in some cases, over 100% that the state is collecting from motor vehicle fees. So the amount residents will pay will go up there. The amount that we get will only go up if more vehicles or newer vehicles are registered. But based on available data, we expect about another $100,000 in revenue next year. Projecting about a $40,000 reduction in interest on investments for obvious reasons. That's about a 12% decrease. Any questions on revenue? Okay. Separate financial warrant articles. So this is what is proposed. $300,000 for highway heavy equipment. These are our trucks. The big headline here is we are trying to make sure that we have sustainable equipment to continue providing the level of service. We have been, some of the trucks we've been replacing, we have been keeping on the fleet so that we have trucks available when we lose contractors and as additional subdivisions come online. So we're preparing for the future in that way here. And so this schedule has worked well. We're out from under a lot of our maintenance headaches in the highway department, which is terrific. And that's a result of the work here. $190,000 for dam repair engineering replacement capital reserve. So this is an agreement that the Conservation Commission and Select Board came to for a cost share of the Richardson Pond Dam reconstruction project. So essentially, in summary, which actually, can you make a note? We'll give them the full agreement, a copy of the full agreement at an upcoming meeting. The Select Board and Conservation Commission agreed that the Select Board would cover 35% of the Richardson Pond Dam replacement from a separate warrant article. And the Conservation Commission would cover 65% of the total cost from the Conservation Fund. And there are a few caveats to that. If the amount of this warrant article is reduced at deliberative session, or if it fails at town meeting, the Conservation Commission will pick up the balance from the Conservation Fund. If there are cost savings from value engineering, construction, or if we don't do construction administration, that'll all happen after town meeting, and that will just be fewer dollars spent from the Conservation Fund. So it was a unanimous decision by the Conservation Commission and Select Board, that funding agreement. And so that $190,000, the Select Board won't budge on that. That will be the budget, that will be the proposal. That warrant article will exist. And those are the contingency plans related to that.
Is this the dam we've been talking about for the last 3 years? And
Yeah.
some want to let it,
Yeah.
we could just let it go.
We can't let it go because that's what we evaluated over the last year. It's a conservation easement.
Right.
Southeast Land Trust holds a conservation easement, and 4 of the 5 priorities in the conservation easement relate to that pond. And so we asked Southeast Land Trust, we'd like to breach the dam. And they said, have an ecological study done and show to us that it will be beneficial ecologically and the priorities of the conservation easement to breach the dam. The Conservation Commission paid for an ecological study, which is valuable to have for conservation properties anyways, wasn't a waste of money. But there was the ecologist was clear that the breaching the dam would have a net negative impact on the ecology in the area. It would be much worse in the first 50 years because habitats are just changing and you just have this marsh that isn't ecologically productive as a pond in the shoreline that exists now. But even after the 50 years, once it kind of restabilizes, the net impact would be less. And it's a prime wetland, which is part of that dynamic. So yeah, that's off the table for that reason, because it's conservation easement. They would need to authorize any work done. Okay, paving non-lapsing articles listed $150,000, fire truck capital reserve $100,000, municipal facilities maintenance $80,000, emergency communication $50,000, police collective bargaining. This is where I put in a placeholder of $30,000. That $30,000 reflects about what the wage increases included for all of their employees would be. So obviously that's going to be subject to the collective bargaining process, but that's just in there for now. Police equipment capital reserve 30, park maintenance capital reserve 20. Yes, please.
Park maintenance, is this, I guess I'm having difficulty with this being in a capital fund. Is this regular maintenance that we need for a park?
It is.
So this is why capital fund's a misnomer.
I think we did.
It was not recommended by this group through the process. It was ultimately approved by voters by single-digit votes. This was the warrant article that was just barely approved by voters.
I think we said yes.
So to your point about capital, is this capital in nature? Capital reserve is a misnomer to the extent that all of our operating funds lapse at the end of the year. Capital reserve funds as a statutory authority to have this separate funding doesn't lapse. Subject to other conditions, but it doesn't lapse.
So it's a non-lapsing fund.
It's a non-lapsing fund. Yeah. So probably referring to it as a non-lapsing fund is better, but the statutory mechanism is a capital reserve fund, because non-lapsing funds in the statutory language actually do have to lapse. They have to have a date that they lapse, but they can be multiple years. So we establish capital reserve funds. And so the reason that matters for maintenance activities is for our park maintenance, the costs of maintenance aren't the same every year. So some years there's a lot higher cost in maintenance, and some years there's a lot lower cost in maintenance. And that plan is in the recreation chapter. And so the proposal last year, which was ultimately approved by voters, is let's put the same amount of money into a capital reserve every year. So it's just consistent. So then those years where we're spending $30,000 and those years where we're spending $5,000 are evened out because we're contributing the same amount every year.
Isn't that the same argument for the election thing?
The dollars are a little bit higher, but it's the same argument.
So, okay.
I
And
think
we
the
could do that.
The argument was like, the reason that it went to capital reserve was because they didn't put it in the operation budget, right?
Right. So they don't have, the only thing in the recreation operating budget is 3 staff members and benefits. All of their other operating expenses are paid for out of the revolving fund, which now you have details, exposure. That's like $700,000 a year. Pretty big department. So we can talk more about that. I mean, if we want to consider that as a mechanism for elections, we certainly could. Or if this group wants to not recommend the park maintenance because, hey, we feel like there's a better mechanism, that's perfectly appropriate also. So we'll have time to talk about that. Bridge and culvert, 15,000, transfer station, 10,000, fire rescue, 10,000, library technology, 3,000, total 988. That's the presentation.
Do we have trustee of the trust funds in here? So we
Yes.
can see what these accounts are.
Chapter 9.
I went right over it. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Are we still keeping the transfer station the same way that it was?
Excellent question. So we have advertised right now a request for proposals to help advise our future decision making. So the reason we're advertising that now and our service contract with Waste Management doesn't end until the end of 2026 is because we only have one town meeting in between now and when the contract ends, and that's in March. So if we wanted town meeting to decide on something, whether it's another long-term contract or transitioning to curbside pickup or anything like that, we only have one chance to do that before the contract ends. So we have a request for proposals that's advertised right now with like 5, but really 7 different options among them to let the provider market tell us what it would cost to do this spectrum of things. And so we'll get that back. The Transfer Station Recycling Center Review Committee will review it, make a recommendation. The select board will discuss it probably at a couple of meetings would be my guess, and we'll make a decision. So the Transfer Station Revolving Fund is what that does is that gives us options. That gives us the ability to either slow the impact of cost increases by spending down some of that money, subsidizing more of the operations. It also gives us the ability to invest in equipment to transport solid waste and recycling ourselves. And so if we did that, if that was the recommendation, if after looking at all the options, that's what we decided was the best thing to do, then that wouldn't require a town meeting vote. So there wouldn't be probably a warrant article about it. We would just more actively prepare for that at the end of the contract. One of the benefits of that also is that like a 10-wheel truck that we could haul with would be functional for winter maintenance also. And we could look at things like a brine system to do some pre-treating, and we could also look at a dump body where we could haul more of our own material. Right now, our 6-wheel dump trucks, we usually pay other folks to haul for us. So all of those things are being considered actively. The information we collect from the RFP will help guide that decision.
It'll be a good service, you know, to.
Curbside pickup would, yeah. So information is power, right? So we need to know so we can make informed decisions. And so we'll be meeting weekly, so I'll keep you posted when those discussions will happen. You're certainly welcome to participate with the Transfer Station Revolving Fund, come to select board meeting, so. Okay, do we want to spend a little bit of time on executive and administration? It's 4:38. We want to go till 5 maybe, see how much progress we make until 5?
Because I think next week's going to be reasonably full, so.
Yep. And so I guess maybe before we do that, before we do executive and administration, let's record any questions we have already for town clerk, tax, and land use. So we make sure that if there are questions we want them to speak to, we do that. So we're talking about
Sections 12 through 15.
Thank you.
Or 13 through 15.
Yeah, 13 through 15. Oh, I should also mention one more thing. I feel like Willie Mays, right? Each chapter now starts with generally a 1-page cover letter from the department head, which just explains what their department's been up to and what they expect to be up to in 2026. I think that will be really helpful for folks that don't pay attention to municipal government at all. They can just, what does our town clerk even do for a year? Okay, so that's in there also. Big thing in town clerks, the election, we talked about that.
I have a general question on, I was noticing through all of the sections that the percent change on salaries and full-time wages and part-time wages were all about 5.6%. So that's the COLA and the step?
Correct. Yep. The step is generally about 2.5%, and the cost of living included in the budget is 3%.
Yeah, I assume we're not talking about any of that for any department.
Right.
Yeah. I had a question about and it'll probably come up on, what is this? This is the town clerk.
Yes.
Where'd it go? It was the credit card reader machine. And it looks like they're renting one, and it looked like they hadn't rented it before. And does the fee that they charge cover that, I presume?
Yes. So that's not, well, why don't you answer that question?
I'll answer that question.
Okay.
The fees passed on to the user.
Yeah.
So the town doesn't incur the fee, but we do pay for the rental of the machine. It's the only option. We can't outright buy it 1 year and then have it for multiple years, but they do service the machine throughout the time that we have it. And so I think at one point we started out with just a couple of machines, but they have such heavy traffic that they needed a machine at each station.
Gotcha.
And so for them, we were trying to cost save just because it is a monthly fee, which nobody likes to pay. But so, yeah.
I think what we pay now for these rentals, Scott, is about $160 a month. There's one for building, one for tax, 3 for town clerk. But we get interest from TD, which more than covers that expense. So we end up okay overall.
Okay.
Let's pull the numbers though, because the rate, I don't know if anybody knows about credit card processing, but every credit card processors charge a different percentage on every card. Whether the logo that's on it, what type of card it is, it's all a risk-based fee structure. And so our transaction fee that we pass on to end users is fixed at
3.25.
The
3.25.
user, so for all town halls, so recreation is a little bit different. Recreation charges a fee on top of the transaction and collects the fee and pays the fees to the credit card company. If you go to town clerk, you get 2 separate charges on your account. One for the town clerk's charge for your registration, and the other one is directly to Invoice Cloud, and we don't see anything. We don't take in anything extra or
I
pay
thought it was
them.
all like
No,
rec. Okay.
No, it's not like
Okay.
rec. Rec is different, and rec was seeing increased fees, and so they switched credit card processors, and so they have a fixed rate of 3.5%, which does cover. Yeah, if someone's paying with American Express for their $900 registration, they're getting recreation's getting a higher percentage as if they're using a MasterCard or Visa.
Scott, does that answer your questions, or is there something you'd like? I mean, I think if we ask the town clerk, I think what she would say is it's a priority for customer service, that being able to offer cards is worth the money. But if you want us to ask it in that way, okay.
Tax does share their swipe, so they've got 2 windows open during their busy season, but when they're, when it's the slow season, they just have 1 window open and they process on one computer. And they're so close together that they just share the reader. So we only pay for 1 reader for tax, which is cost savings.
Love to see the fee to go down to nothing, but
Yeah.
one day.
Paper check, that's the best.
Same. My registration renewals are in September, and the first day you can register your dogs is October 1st. And so I'm always like, for half a day, I'm always delinquent on my vehicle registration, so I can do it in 1 check.
The ultimate of faith.
Yeah.
3 checks is cost $3.
Okay, anything else in town clerk that we want to ask? And by all means, please don't feel like this is the only opportunity to bring up questions. This is just, if we have questions ahead of time, let's get it to them. More likely they'll be able to answer it on the spot. But their department heads are expecting to have questions brought up real time or even later in the process.
So is there a question for Kim, town clerk, about the credit card processing?
Has to be answered.
Tax?
Since we don't pay. I mean, the town doesn't pay, so.
Okay, where's tax?
14.
14.
14, yep.
Thank you.
And fit planning isn't this time, right? It's next time?
Planning is the next week.
Yeah.
Yep, so we'll talk about planning also.
Okay, so I wanted to ask about the Conservation Commission note taker.
Yes.
So we could just.
Oh, let's
talk
do
about
tax
that.
first.
Okay, let's stay on tax. 14.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I mean, these are in order now.
We went through the trouble.
We're not used to that.
Still looks like there's a typo on page 2 of 3.
This is for the narrative.
Oh, maybe it's not a typo. Yeah. It's, yeah,
The percentage increase.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
That is right, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
How about the benefits? Why would that go up so much? Is that all attributed to? Is it a change of plan, somebody elected?
This is in tax.
Yes.
9% is probably, the budgeted increase was 10%.
Okay.
And the actual is 7.7, but that isn't reflecting the actual because that was before we got that information.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome. Amy, can you make a note? This cover sheet has 2 white rows next to each other. Okay. I think it's because of the hidden rows probably. So we'll have
Zeros.
still.
Make them blue.
You know what I'm talking about. Anything else on tax? We want to ask ahead of time. Land use ahead of time?
So land use, I just wanted to understand where the new car came from, the extra vehicle. Just curiosity.
Yep, a cruiser.
Yeah.
And it's more for building than land use, although we'll all use it in the town hall.
Okay.
So it'd be a second administrative vehicle.
Okay.
Yep. And that was so we generally get about $6,000, $7,000 at auction for the cruisers. And so the end of useful life as a cruiser is generally sooner than the end of useful life as a vehicle. And so it's pretty common in New Hampshire municipalities that the law enforcement vehicles, patrol vehicles end up in administrative use either within the department or elsewhere.
Okay.
So that we brought that proposal to the select board earlier this year. As you continue to look at land use, I also point out a part of the process that was a little bit different, usually behind the scenes that isn't necessarily, this group isn't involved in. But one of the select board's identified goals and action items was doing a complete audit of the operating budget, looking for opportunities to consolidate and find cost savings. And so how we implemented that action item is during the budget development process, before budgets were submitted, Amy, as the finance administrator, met with each individual department head, sat down and went through every line item of the budget. So you'll see this year, maybe even more so than prior years, a lot of these small budget increases, line item by line item increases. Land use is a great example, 500 here, 200 there, 300 there, 300 there, 200 there. Those reductions are a direct result of the work that Amy did in auditing the budget, meeting with department heads, looking at prior utilization, challenging them on their anticipated utilization. And so it was a tremendous amount of work that was done, in the different than kind of the normal process behind the scenes, but the result is reflected in the proposal. So just make sure you.
Thank you.
No
That's
Make
We're still in planning land use, right?
Yes.
The 20% increase in salary?
We went from an inexperienced planner to a very experienced planner, and we needed it.
All right, and the benefits too, 39% increase there?
That's going to be the census changes that we talked about. So when you have a staff member that vacates a position and has certain elections, whether it's in lieu of or otherwise, and somebody that comes in and has other health election needs.
That's it for me. Anybody else? Done.
Okay, so, and we're not done, right? So review the chapters, read it ahead of the meeting. If you have something that comes up between this week and next, you can email it to us. You don't have to bring it up during the meeting. The department heads are very appreciative of this process change that we've gone through, and they're appreciative of the budget committee, but they understand that the other side of that is that they need to be ready and willing to address questions whenever they come up through the process. So
I would like more detail on the general government building contracts, maintenance.
Okay.
Why that went up.
Okay.
Just, it doesn't say, I'm not sure it says how much it went up for each area.
Oh, so you'd like to see a comparison from
just-
last year to
just
next year?
something that, what was responsible for the 18% increase in
So,
4350?
we'll get for general government building contracts, a breakdown of 2025 budget by service compared to 2026 budget by service. Yep, excellent question.
And do you have any comments on the capital improvement plan and how we're going to address that in here or not?
How much time do you have? So a couple of items. First, the capital improvement program is being finalized currently. It'll be a draft will be going to the planning board soon. We are targeting a November joint meeting with the planning board and select board to adopt it again this year and kind of revisit the funding plan. So that's kind of status quo right now, process-wise. And this, the warrant articles do feed into that. It is, it's consistent with what we're trying to do with the CIP. But Ernie, the new town planner, pointed out that there's a better way to do this. And the CIP committee by default in New Hampshire in statute is the planning board. But there's a statutory authority for town meeting to allow the select board to appoint a CIP committee separate than the planning board. It still has to include a planning board member, but separate than the planning board. But that requires town meeting authority. So the select board is currently considering sponsoring a warrant article in March to ask voters to allow them to appoint a CIP committee, which is consistent with one of the strategic plan goals for the select board set, which is to involve the budget committee in capital planning and how we do that. So if the select board sponsors the article and if residents approve the article, what I would anticipate the select board doing is approaching the budget committee and saying, can we appoint you with a member of the planning board as a CIP committee? And in the spring and early summer, work is focused on capital planning and funding and that process. And then in summer into fall, work is focused on the operating budget. So we're a long ways from that right now, but that's kind of where the train's headed.
And so we're kicking the can down the road for the big ticket items we've talked about in past years.
The select board during their strategic planning process expressed with the upcoming anticipated 11% tax rate increase and 22% increase from one bill to the next, from the first bill to the second bill, the select board was expressed confidently that a bond, like a $13 million bond like we were talking about, is not something they wanted to ask voters for in 2026.
2027, 2028, any idea?
So, I mean, I think 2027 I don't think we can wait a lot longer, or we have to look at it different ways. Now, the benefit, we're not necessarily kicking the can down the road because we're not ready to do these projects right now anyways. We have engineering underway. The money we've set aside in the Bridge and Culvert Capital Reserves has allowed us to fund engineering activities on most of these projects, and we continue to progress to make these shovel-ready projects. None of them are shovel-ready right now. And so we're not behind on the projects. We are behind on funding in the typical way that we fund projects in Barrington. But the time that we have will allow us to actively pursue alternative funding sources as well. There's a lot of local state funding that isn't going away. Aquatic resource management funding, the people pay penalties when they impact wetlands. That money the state gives most of it right back to communities for wetland crossing projects and things. So the time will give us the ability to make shovel-ready projects, firm up the budgets and the costs and the alternatives and make those political decisions, explore alternative funding. And so it's kicking the can down the road in some sense, but we're really not delaying the projects themselves unless or until we can't get funding in 2027 or beyond.
And do we at some point want to discuss whether or not we should be using warrant articles for fire trucks or whether we decide we just want to bond them? It seems like we've talked about that over a few years and never really came to a final decision.
In my opinion, I think if the train is headed to a separate CIP committee that's really bridging the gap between capital planning and funding, that's probably the most appropriate venue. The select board identified it as a strategic priority. The select board wants to do that. I don't know that we have the time to do that well between now and March 2026.
Yeah, that's fine.
Which I don't think you were saying that, but I just think if we're queuing this up, integrating that into the conversation for this separate CIP committee, consistent with a strategic priority and doing it that way seems to make sense. What do other members think?
In terms of?
The CIP committee and, well, not necessarily specific to the bonding, but about taking this process to consider things like that and the CIP and funding these items and priorities. That process makes sense?
I don't object to it. You know, it's looking at the options. It's who's going to do it is one.
Mhm.
Do we have the staff to do it, and you know how it looks? But I'm interested in that. You know, bonding versus putting money aside. That would be an interesting discussion to have.
I'm interested in being on the committee. I think I'd love to see it really kick the tires of these, really look at alternatives. Love to get some naysayers on there, just to,
Agreed.
you know.
I really like the bonding, but not necessarily for things that are consumable. And I would like the bonding for development, like especially business development, small business development. Even if it's not like, you know, within vicinity of Barrington, but home develop, you know, home business development. I mean, there are so many different ways that we can develop for economic planning.
Right.
I think what Scott's proposing is something that can be worked on actually over a number of years, doesn't have to be
Yeah.
2027.
Yeah, that's why.
Maybe
Because
year round.
Right now,
That's why you use bonds.
the fire fund has
Perfect.
$700,000 in it, so it's not like they're going to be desperate if something has to happen, but if we continue to get, and I haven't looked that far ahead, but if we continue to get the replacement schedule that Rick used to give us, I think that gives us pretty good judgment as to where we are and how much we have to push an alternate plan.
Okay, well, that sounds like so that's the trajectory, and I'll bring those comments and feedback to the select board when we talk about the potential warrant article for 2026 to appoint a CIP committee. So we'll see where that goes. I'll keep you posted about that. Okay. Do we want to spend time on executive administration now? Do we think now that since we've looked at
I think we'd be okay next week. So.
Yep. So let's do that. So the agenda for next week will be, we'll start with the review of the budgets in the order that they're in the budget binder. We will review the next week's.
Next week's going to be fire and police, I think.
Facilities, cemeteries, police, and fire.
Yeah.
Which we already have a question relative to facilities, so we'll get that on there. And we'll look at any questions that we have for ahead of time for those.
Okay.
Awesome.
Any other business?
I don't think so.
It's getting a lot easier going through this every year. Thank you for your efforts.
It's great feedback. Music to our ears.
Yes,
Yes.
definitely. Much cleaner,
Indeed.
better.
I heard a motion.
Yep, and I second. All in favor of adjourning? See you next week.